Welcome back to another episode of the Stewardship Conversations, where I join together with faith-based professionals to answer your money questions. Today's question is a really great example of one that doesn't really have a good, straightforward answer. Not a lot of money questions do have like a one size fits all, but this question specifically does have a lot of different ways that it can be approached, and it will be very specific to an individual situation. But in this episode, we do want to cover this topic and give you some ideas on how to approach the question about buying a car and how to purchase it, whether or not to take out a loan, whether or not to use your investments to buy it in cash. There's a lot of different ways to approach this again, and I have my friend David Sandu joining me today to talk about this question a little bit more in depth and to give you some ideas on how to answer it for yourself. If you have any questions on your finances that you would love answered from a biblical perspective, please let us know. You can drop your question in the comments below, or you can fill out the form that is in the description for the video below. And we would love to answer your question in the future. But with that, let's talk about purchasing cars. Hey, David, how are you today? Thanks for joining me again for another stewardship conversation.
Good, Katie. I'm excited to chat again.
Yeah. So today's question might be a little bit up your alley, and I think it's a really great question to ask, but also comes with a lot of different variables in this. But this question comes from Pamela. She asks us, should we finance the purchase of a new car or liquidate some assets, and she says in parentheses, stocks that they have, and pay in full with cash? So basically, there's a lot of factors that come into this. Should they take out a loan to buy this car, or should they pay in cash? But if they're going to pay in cash, they need to sell some of their stocks in order to get that cash. They don't currently have it. But I just want to put the ball into your court. David, what do you have to say to Pamela?
Yeah, well, this is a great question, and I'll start off by saying I love paying for cars with cash because you walk out, you don't feel any regret or any remorse.
Yep.
You just feel the joy of just enjoying the new car, or the gently used car. And so I'm a huge fan of paying for cars in cash. Now, where we've done that, and we've paid for the last 3 or 4 cars in cash, but we've done that because we've saved up for it. And so it wasn't necessarily that we were putting any money in the market, because we knew that money was coming up. And so, generally when we're looking at assets in the market, from a financial advising perspective, we're looking at a term of over 5 years, because generally less than 5 years in the market, we see kind of not the best returns, but over 5 years, we see, generally good returns. And so when we look at investing, I think it's important to understand what is the purpose of the investment, but then also what is the end use, what is the end goal. And so, for example, if I say, hey, I'm going to replace the roof on my house next year, and it's going to cost $30,000. Well, I probably don't want to put the $20,000 I have right now in the market in hopes that next year it'll be 30,000, because it might be 10. And so I would just be cautious and make sure you understand the purpose of investing, and make sure the time horizon is in alignment with your goals. And so when we talk about, in the question she's asking, should we liquidate assets? And so there's a couple of different things that we have to consider. The first one I would say is like, what type of an account is it? And let me preface it by saying I would always prefer to pay for it in cash with non-stock accounts. So the best way would be to just save up for it and pay for it with cash. But if you maybe, I don't know your situation, but maybe you've run into a roadblock and you just really need to purchase a car right now, and all of your assets are in the stock, I would look at what are the types of accounts. So is it in a taxable brokerage account, meaning it's not in a retirement account, or is it in a retirement account? Is it in like a 401k or an IRA? Some considerations I would be thinking about, right? If it's in an IRA and you sell, then you're potentially borrowing from your future self to pay for the current self. If it's in a 401k and you're maybe considering borrowing against your 401k to do that, because some employers allow you to borrow against your 401k. Just be careful of that, because if you were to terminate or if you were to leave your employer, they might require that you pay that back immediately. And if it's in a brokerage account, for example, just a taxable brokerage account that you open, I would be in any of these situations, especially the way the market has been, you might be locking in your losses now. And so I would be cautious of doing that, of liquidating assets in your stock, unless potentially it was a very, very small portion of your entire portfolio. So if it was maybe less than maybe 5% or something of your full portfolio to do this, then there might be an opportunity to do that. And so I would just be cautious because the market has been so volatile recently. Then just make sure you're not putting yourself in a position where you have trumped, yourself in 5 or 10 or 15 years for the sake of today.
Yeah. Yeah. Great points, David. I think, like, as we were saying, it really does depend on people's specific situation with this. We don't really know what's going on right now in this, the finances of Pamela, but great options to kind of consider. And it's always good to talk to professionals too. So finding a licensed financial planner, someone like David, maybe, who can actually look at your situation and your numbers and give you a really good recommendation for what might be best for you at that moment. But it does really matter about, what are your long-term plans? What was the original intention for those investments? Because if you did invest for specifically buying this car, then it's like, great, then that's what that money is for in this moment. The one thing that I kind of honed in on with this question is that idea of like new car. I know, David, you were saying that you really like to buy cars in cash. We also really love to buy cars in cash when we can. And so the best way sometimes to do that is also to purchase used. When cars that are brand new come off the lot, they generally lose about 50% of their value within the first 4 years. And so when you buy something that's worth like 30 grand and you're putting all this money into it, you're losing 50% of that pretty quickly. And there's a lot of people that don't like buying used cars, but we typically buy cars that are only just a couple years old, maybe a few years old. And when you buy them and when you find them that have been gently used, and you can use lots of different tools out there. Carfax is a great one. True Car, which David and I were talking about before, actually was where we found our most recent car this year. And then using things like Edmunds, which will kind of give you different facts about cars and their actual true value of them long term. These are really great tools to help you find a car that might be gently used, but still feel pretty new, because for the most part, in the last few years, cars are pretty much the same. There's some fun little features that come up every few years. But if you find one that feels just gently used, it will seem pretty much brand new. But yeah, that was my thought on just this question specifically. I honed in on that, like, new car. I'm like, what does new? Is it new, brand new, or new to you car? Because we just like to buy new to us cars. And we've had really great luck with many of them. So yeah. Any other thoughts?
Another thing I want to say is, let's say you've decided to take that step and purchase. The other thing is, when you're shopping, and this is slightly related to your question, but one thing that we did was we went on TrueCar, and so we live in the DFW area. But what we actually did, and you can do this in TrueCar and a lot of other websites, but you can actually see what price, what prices of cars are in your area. And then we also looked at Houston, and then Austin and San Antonio. And so I know it's a little bit more work, but we saved about $2,000 or $3,000 by doing that, by pricing out cars and then going to different dealerships and calling dealerships. And we actually ended up driving to Austin to buy our last one. But it actually saved us quite a bit of money. And when you think about that, maybe it takes you 3 or 4 hours to do that, but you save $1,500 or $1,000. That's pretty good money per hour. And so I wouldn't knock doing your research and making sure that you're saving even there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. When we were looking for a used car at the time, we really like having SUVs that have a third row. My husband's a youth pastor, so we drive that car around with lots of children all the time. So having that third row is really great. But here in Colorado, finding a 4-wheel drive SUV, they're so expensive. And so we did actually consider going out of state, somewhere where they're not as popular of cars. because of the timing, we ended up not doing that. We needed a car pretty quickly. My car had been totaled in a car accident. I do have a YouTube video talking about my experience going through insurance with this. So if anyone's interested, they can definitely go check that out. But yeah, so we needed a car pretty quickly because we were borrowing people's cars and things. And so we didn't have the time to go out of state. But when we did look at it, we could have potentially saved around $5,000 just by going out to like the Midwest or somewhere out south where the cars, you know, big SUV 4-wheel drive cars aren't as popular. And so they're a little bit cheaper. Whereas here in Colorado, they're very, very popular. Everyone seems to have like a Toyota 4Runner, which is like one of my dream cars, but they're really expensive out here. But yeah, cool. Any other thoughts before we wrap up, David?
Yeah, I think, you mentioned this already, but, this is such a unique question that this could really go into like 4 or 5 different avenues. So I would just say, talk to someone who really understands your situation and can really give you guidance specifically, because this is not a, yes or no thing. This is when you make investment decisions, they also have tax consequences. And again, it might be borrowing from your future self to pay for today. So again, there's just a lot of implications there. So I would say, get guidance, find someone that you trust to talk with.
Definitely. Great way to wrap it up. Well, that is it for today's question. If you do have any questions that you want answered by faith-based financial professionals, please drop your question in the comments below, or we do have a form in the show notes below where you can enter those questions as well. But we hope to see you next time. Bye, David.
Thanks, Katie. Bye-bye.